The final system we are going to look at when it comes to the execution systems in the supply chain is a transport management system. Transport management systems are specific software for managing, obviously, the transport operations. Prior to briefly describe the different functions they integrate mainly, you have here again a review provided by Gartner for um, the main options you have out there. And here you have the logos of some of the most used TMS out there for you to implement. So the functions have to do with a planning. So when we are talking about planning, we're talking about the midterm. So we need to know how many vehicles, what capacity we are going to need, so that we can carry on the operations we expect to have in the midterm. And by midterm, I mean the following weeks or months. But also they can assist you in the execution itself, and it has to do with the very details of operating the the different transportation systems you're using, from vehicles, from trains or vessels you might be using. Okay? You can go down to the detail of the dock scheduling. If you have a logistics platform, you have several docks, and you need or you might need to be very careful when you assign docks to the different trucks that are coming, either to unload or to load items. This is the ideal situation, but many times you cannot control that, and sometimes just trucks show up when they can. These kind of software systems can assist you in fleet routing, although as far as I know, the power of the optimization algorithms they have are not very good. So there's room for improvement here. But what they do have, it's a functions it relates to visibility, so that you are aware of where your different assets are. Your again all sorts of vehicles, and where you can locate your different items, pallets, or whatever you are interested in. And this is also related with managing your freights, so that you can have a high control of where your things are. And finally, they allow you to perform analysis on your data. As long as you have all these functions in your system, of course, your interest is in logging what has happened. And you can look back to what happened. And by means of descriptive analytics, you can make sense of what happened. And although that's not foreseeing the future or having some estimate of what you can expect from your system, it's at least a good starting point for you to to make decisions, because you know at least where you are. Okay, in both warehouse management systems and in transportation systems, there are some technologies that are quite recent. Well, they have several decades, but in terms of logistics and supply chain management from the industrial revolution and so on, these are kind of new. So we have RFID, barcodes, and OCR, optical character recognition, which I'll comment on briefly in the following slides. And you also can use smart cards or biometric systems. And these are elements you can make use of within your systems to read information, to store information, and to assist all the operations related to sorting, storing, retrieving items, which is a far more convenient than the traditional methods, needless to say, paper, for example, which is a very primitive way of storing information and a very um, poor way to to have information stored so that you can afterwards analyze it, because there's no much analysis you can do if you have things on paper. Um, Barcodes are very well known. They have been out there for many years compared to the other ones. Uh, Now we have a newer version, which is the QR, which is a more sophisticated version for barcodes, which allows us to, with one reader like this device we have here, quickly get information about the item, the box, the pallet, whatever we are attaching this barcode to, and it allows us to get information very quickly and very easily. A most recent technology is radio identification frequency, RFID, which allows us to identify, obviously, elements by means of radio frequency. We can use both passive and active technologies. In the passive, what we have is a tag that is attached to the products, and it is the antenna or the reader, the sensor that sort of detects the tag. But the tag by itself cannot send any information. And on top of that, we have a better in terms of the quality of the possibilities it offers. We have a active RFID where you have its tags which are active and that can send information to the rest of the system, letting the system that they're there, and that allows us to not having to trigger these readers all the time. So that only the communications is established when the tag sends that information. And we also have OCR. This is something very well known because many applications we have in our cell phones and our computers already have that. Allows us to read text we have. And this is something that we find, for example, in vessels where you have these containers, each identified by a particular code, and you can read that as the vessels arrive at the harbor, and the identification of the contents is far easier than if you didn't have you couldn't resort to that technology. A few more things on the technology. Let me show quickly. This is a summary. You can get lots of information about how these codes are built. But I just want you to know that there is a standard for RFID. There is this EPC Global, which is an organization that is responsible for keeping the standard and like pushing everyone to use that standard, where you have a set of items that are related to first the organization, okay, or the type of good we're referring to, the organization that are responsible for the product this tag is attached to, and then and this is assigned by this organization, EPC Global, and then you have some other items related to the item itself, which is something each company is responsible for. Okay, so as you can see from the number of items of the character bits you have and the possibilities you have a huge amount of combinations that allows us to identify or to possibly identify likewise a huge number of items. When it comes to the barcodes, the possibilities are not that large because you can see that these items, these codes have less elements of information. Okay, not the QRs, which have more information stored. But one relevant thing here is that the cost, maybe this data is already outdated, but the ratio, the cost of one item to the other is pretty similar, so that using barcodes of QRs it's pretty cheap, and however, on the contrary, using RFID tags is not that cheap. It's been cheaper and cheaper over time, and now some companies have these tags in their products. Now you can go to the Decathlon stores and you don't need to scan the codes. As you put your items in the place where you're supposed to put them, there is the tag that lets the machine what you already are carrying, and you pay for that. And that is a way for them to keep track of the inventory they have in their stores, and management is far easier. Okay? So this is these are technologies you can use both in warehouse management systems and in transportation management systems. And the next thing we're going to do, we're going to take a look at supplier relationship management systems, and downstream the customer relationship management systems, which is where I will devote the next videos to.